And the final speaker for this session is Sara Schroter from the BMJ.
I'm going to talk to you today about a very new initiative at the BMJ where we've tried to incorporate patient review into the peer review process alongside traditional reviewers. This is largely an internal evaluation of our own processes, as you can see by the authors listed, but we have actually involved our patient reviewers within the evaluation plan of this initiative and also within some of the stuff I'm going to present today. I'd really like to take the opportunity to thank our peer reviewers, our patient reviewers and our peer reviewers who have helped support this initiative, because of course we couldn't do this without their help, and also those who have helped us with the research that I'm going to talk about today. Just by way of background, a little bit about the BMJ's patient partnership strategy. We launched this in 2014 because we see partnering with patients as an ethical imperative. It's essential to improving the quality, safety, and value of health systems. So what we're trying to do at the journal is to make patient partnership integral to the way that we work and the way that we think, as well as advocating for, as well as something we advocate for in healthcare and research. So what we're doing is we're asking authors of educational articles to try to co-produce content with patients. We're asking our researchers to describe how they're involving their patients, any patients in the research that they're describing. And if they're not, why not? We're incorporating the patient perspective in on our decision-making committees. That means we're involving patients in our editorial boards meetings, and we employ patient editors. We also invite patients to write content for the journal, and we do patient review, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about now. So we have around 600 odd patients and carers now registered on our database. We're using Scholar One, and we now invite a patient review as often as we can when we see a manuscript that we think could benefit from input from patients. We don't expect our patients to have any medical or scientific training. We're asking them to comment on a different set of questions. So the objectives of what I'm going to report now are really that we wanted to evaluate the feasibility of integrating this patient review alongside traditional review within the process. So I'm going to talk about analysis of some routine data, a survey of a small number of editors, and also a survey of the patient reviewers themselves. I'm not going to read through this slide, but here you can see the actual questions that we ask the patient reviewers to comment on. So they're very, very different. They're not critical appraisal questions like you might see in other journals. They are really about the questions that matter to patients. I'll just give you a moment to look at that. So I said I was going to talk about 3 different sections. So this bit is about acceptance and completion rates of the request to review to patients. So the BMJ receives around 3,500 research articles a year. We reject 80% upfront without peer review at all. So 20% go for peer review. And in 2016, we had 359 out of 647, that's 55% of research papers that went for review had a patient review invitation. And just to compare, we have the first column is the traditional peer reviewers, and the last column is the patient reviewers, and you can see that there's very similar rates of agreement to take up the offer to review, and also very good similar completion rates. And finally, looking at the interval between agreeing to review and completing the review, again, pretty similar. I think some concerns were that patients might take a lot longer, but I don't think there's much evidence to suggest that they are. If anyone wants to look in more detail at the patient reviewer guidance, there's the web link there. Or you can simply Google BMJ patient reviewer. So very briefly, we did an anonymous survey of the 7 research editors who are currently requesting peer review invitations. 5 of the editors believe that the patient reviews were adding a little value, and 2 a lot of value when asked none, a little, or a lot. Some are experiencing difficulties identifying appropriate patient reviewers. This is largely because we have 600 patient reviewers and we're a general medical journal. It's pretty hard to cover all topics, and it can be quite hard to match keywords that the editors might use for a condition with what the patients might have given. And some struggle with communicating over papers with the patients. I don't think that was a particularly big issue, but that's just something they mentioned. So all of the editors said that occasionally they include insights that are not raised by the other reviewers. 6 occasionally and 1 frequently found patient reviewers' comments helpful when advising authors on revisions. 4 felt that other journals should adopt patient review, and 3 were unsure. I think the hesitancies were around whether other journals might have the resources to do so, and also thinking that it might be better to involve patients much earlier in the review, in the research process than at publication stage. That was only 7 editors, small numbers. So what sort of value did the editors report that patient review was adding? Well, patients are the best place to know if a research question really matters. Identifying relevant outcome measures were cited several times. They're very good at drawing out the implications of what doctors and patients could do differently, and sharing with authors how to involve patients in research design. It's clear that some researchers really struggle with this as an idea, so the patients were quite often reporting back and saying how they might improve this. So patient review has the potential to change behaviour of researchers. Oops, is that the wrong one? So thirdly, I'm going to talk about the patient reviewer survey. So we sent an invitation to those who had reviewed in 2015-16. We had a 74% response rate. Reviewers came from 13 countries, largely from the UK and the US. 82% would recommend being a patient reviewer to others. 88% think that more journals should adopt patient review. And 80%, interesting, are not concerned about doing open review. So we've talked a lot about open review today. This is quite reassuring, but 20% are concerned about it, and we shouldn't forget that. And we do have a system, if they want to review anonymously, that we will respect this, and it's a challenge, but we do. Only 20 within the sample had actually gone through and seen the other reviewers' comments. Because we reject so many papers, a lot of these papers weren't getting through to that stage. But those that did get to that stage were actually really agreeing that authors were addressing their points, that they were courteous to them, and they felt that they were able to include points that the other reviewers weren't including. There's a quote from one of the reviewers. At first I took the stance of who am I to challenge them, but I recognised after the first review that I'm the patient with the experience and perspective that can help to inform the practice of research. And we asked what sort of factors would help to increase their confidence to review. And these, no great surprises here, these actually reflect quite what you'd expect of any reviewer. But familiarity with the process, and we started out, we're learning as well, so it's an ongoing process of what we're tweaking, but the more they became familiar with what we were asking them to do and clearer message from us, the more confident they've become. Seeing other peer reviewers' comments helps. Seeing sample reviews, we've posted some online now, so they have examples to go to when they're confused as what we're asking them to do. Feedback from editors is always valued. And knowing that the reviews were being valued, being asked to review again. When we changed our guidance based on feedback from patients, they noticed that, they felt that was helpful, and we continuously do upgrade it, and we will be based on the survey results as well. And seeing comments in letters back to authors. Also, they're reviewing for other organisations. These patients are very active, some of them, so it's all a big learning process, but they're getting more and more confident and more engaged with what we're trying to ask them to do, and we're getting hopefully more engagement. So when you ask them how they'd like to be acknowledged and how we might improve the process, the whole experience for them, we were quite surprised that actually we offer a year subscription to bmj.com, and we thank them online at the end of the year along with all our other reviewers. And you might think that these are things that patients aren't particularly interested in, but actually they really, really are appreciating the access to the information. So They're information hungry, they want to know more about their conditions, so if we could reward them with more access to more articles or specific conditions, that's what they would like. They want more tips and tools that can help them review, more online resources and training, not necessarily face-to-face training, but the ability to access resources. They like a bit more communication and understanding of how the process is working, a bit more about how review works within the journal. So some of these are very easily fixable. They'd like a bit more support, possibly just to know who to contact if they have a question about how to improve the review or what they can and can't do. We do offer that, it's just some obviously felt we needed more support. They need a sense of community to work with each other, to share experiences, and it's a very lonely experience reviewing, to share that experience and what they found tricky and how they can help each other. Other rewards they might like included a 2-year subscription to bmj.com. I'm most surprised by this, and also access potentially to some of our other journals, our specialist journals. People were occasionally saying they might like an Amazon voucher or something, but there was very much not the pull towards saying we need to be paid. Some, yes, I won't deny that. Some say, you know, you should pay us for our time, and that's a very valid argument. But largely, people were very happy with what we were offering them. I'm just going to see, can you all read the quotes at the back? Yeah? Great. So here's some straight from the patients. A few of you are laughing. What are you laughing at? The unbelievably awful submission software is one that some have struggled with. It's very easy to assume that when they register an account, for example, on BMJ, on Scholar One, that the fields are all relevant to them. You ask them about their institution and all sorts of things. They're like, eek, not relevant. So you can easily forget what it might feel like to a patient reviewer. So largely positive, but we won't be forgetting the negatives, and we will try and improve things. We can't change the software. That's the way it is, because as you know, we will review in this way. It's entrenched. So we asked them what thoughts they'd like to share with editors at other journals without actually knowing that we were going to present to you. So here's what they'd like to tell you. Nothing for the patient about the patient. If you do not include the patient, the loss is all yours. We have the massive added value you miss. Only a patient has the patient's insights. You can read the next yourself. Why wouldn't you involve patients? So briefly in conclusion, I think that patient review is feasible alongside traditional review at the BMJ. Very specific to the BMJ, but we're doing well at it, and we are hoping to continue to improve it. I think it's possible. It's not been without its challenges. Editors are finding it quite hard to invite patient reviewers at times, finding the right reviewers, finding the time to do that. We're all busy. Questions about anonymity and open review. But largely, I think the editors are fully on board that this is a really worthwhile initiative, and we have a lot of enthusiastic support from the patients and carers. And reading the responses from the survey was really, really reassuring. So that's a very brief feasibility mixed overview. What we want to do next is the really interesting bit. We want to do a descriptive analysis of the changes that are made to manuscripts as a result of patient review, but also to look at that in the context of what the other peer reviewers were saying. So it could be easy to say patient reviewers are not doing anything useful, they're not changing anything, but actually to look and see, are the traditional reviewers doing it? So what changes are happening? And also to capture what the experience is like from the author's perspective and also from the peer reviewer's perspective, the traditional peer reviewers. Thank you.
Rob Sealis, New Zealand, very, very good initiative, and totally applaud it. When the editor looks for a patient reviewer, does he or she look at the population that's described in the study? the ethnicity of the study group, for instance, because patients' perspectives on care and treatment can differ quite a lot amongst ethnicities.
Not being an editor myself, I can't answer that directly, but I would have thought they would consider that. You have to bear in mind that we only have 600 odd reviewers, so if they're quite pleased if they found one that matches the right condition at all, but yes, it's something that I would expect they would be looking at.
Thank you.
Back.
Hi, Kristen Mueller, Melanoma Research Alliance. Really, really fascinating. I know you said you hadn't surveyed the authors or the reviewers yet, the peer reviewers. But have you received any anecdotal feedback or anything like that? I'm particularly interested in what the peer reviewers thought of the process.
I'm not aware of any. Again, I'm looking at one of the editors at the front. He's not aware either of any, but I think it's definitely a really, really interesting research question to follow up on.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
thank you.
Hi, Lewis First, editor, Pediatrics. Thank you very much. Can you comment on how you got the 600 and how diverse and inclusive they are? Is it a high literacy level? The representation and the solicitation, I think, would be very interesting for us to learn about.
It's a very important question. It's a very tricky one to answer. How have we recruited? Well, we've talked about the initiative. We've published lots of editorials. We've asked people to reach out to patients that they know, including authors writing clinical content, to contact their patients. We've contacted some patient organizations. We've just tried to put the feelers out as much as possible, but we didn't actually have the resources to kind of go crazy and invite as many people as possible because we have to register the patients themselves. So are they representative is a very difficult question to answer. They come from various countries with various conditions, but I can't really say more.
Thank you.
In front.
So that's a fascinating initiative. Mark Dewey from Berlin. I have one question that relates to your question, why not do it? Before I get to that, which is more critical, I'd like to comment in a positive perspective as an author in 2016, publishing an RCT in the BMJ, and we found the patient reviewer made a comment that was eye-opening. None of the other reviewers came up with this perspective, and we actually had an answer, because she said, why don't you include the patient perspective? We had asked this in the study. We hadn't included it in the first submission, so that was perfect in improving the paper. That having said, still, I think one of the main concerns could be, especially if you look at the European situation of being a lot of patient advocacy groups around that are somehow, or to a huge extent, influenced by industry. How to avoid this potential major conflict that could come into these reviews?
I mean, it's a very, very important question, and we're pretty hot on conflicts of interest at the BMJ and have zero tolerance for some sections of the journal. We do ask patients to declare conflicts of interest, and we do, when they register, collect some information about what sort of organisations they work for. But again, we're working with a very limited pool, and our hands are tied, but we hope to avoid that.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the example.
Nicola Nugent, Royal Society of Chemistry. Just a quick question about your patient reviewers. You mentioned that they don't need to have scientific training, but are there any other selection criteria or any other sort of minimum qualifications or anything like that?
No, they're simply asked if they want to contribute, they can. Some people did comment in the survey that they felt a bit frustrated, that they thought there were going to be more sort of typical patients, and that many of the reviews that we'd published as sample reviews had clearly been done by academics who were patients. So I think we do have the full mix, that we have a patient who feels strongly about something, we have an academic who has a condition, we have ex-editors, we have all sorts of things. But
And do you do anything to sort of manage the quality of the reviews that you're getting? So if patients are consistently providing poor quality reports,
we don't provide training, and we don't provide extensive feedback. If someone has provided a good review that's helpful, then we try to thank them. But as I said at the beginning, with 3,500 papers a year, it becomes tricky. But we try our best.
In the back.
Yeah, Mark Helfand from Portland, Oregon. So I'm involved in a similar initiative at PCORI in our peer review. My question actually comes a little bit more from working in health experience research. And one of the quotations you put up there, which is right on target, is that, you know, the patient brings their experience of the condition to the review, something that the reviewers don't do. Now, my question is about the credentials or qualifications, as other questioners said. If that's the case, do you encourage the patient reviewers to describe their experiences in their reviews so that the authors and others know what they're bringing to it? Or do you know, what their perspective is? Or do you tell them not to do that and just to review the content and
I flashed up what we actually ask them is pretty close to, that's pretty much all they get. And we don't ask them to describe their experiences and how that makes it relevant, but that's an interesting idea, yeah.
In the front?
Stephanie Kinnan from the American Society for Gastrointestinal Endoscopy. So kind of a two-part question. I was wondering if you're asking them specific questions for individual papers, how much of it is general feedback from them versus actual specific suggestions for revisions? And then what about the editors? Are they reviewing these reviews and editing them, or picking and choosing what they're sending on to the authors?
Absolutely not. Everything goes on to the authors. We have an open peer review system. Everything is signed, everything is transparent. So if a patient makes a comment, it's untouched and goes back to the authors. Thank you.
The back?
Hi. It's a quick tweeted question from Malawi, from Lucinda Taylor in Malawi. Has BMJ considered patient reviewers from Africa for submissions from Africa? I think you sort of answered it earlier, but it'd be good to specifically respond to that.
We'll be very welcome to receive patient review requests to review. Everyone is welcome, as we've said, so if they would like to, that would be excellent. And if we have some papers from Africa, then that would also be ideal to send a request to review. So yes, please do sign up if you want.
Okay, I'll tweet back, more the merrier. Yes, please, definitely. Thanks.
Jose Marino from the BMJ. So I'm one of the editors who responded, and some of the questions relate to some things related to the editorial process. So we do have about 600 people on our database. They're listed by condition that they've identified. This is my condition, or I'm a carer for this condition, or I have experience with this condition. That's how we can find them. We can't really then say, you know, more specific than that. It very much depends on how they've identified themselves, and it's sometimes more difficult. If I'm looking for an expert reviewer, I can do a PubMed search, I can look at institutions. Here I just have to go by what I have on my database, or ask people with experience with patient review at the journal to recommend someone, and that's another way we go about. We do read all the patient reviews. We discuss them at the manuscript meeting, where we'll put in their input, and we'll sometimes say, you know, the best review we got was from the patient because they have the best or the most insightful comments, or they're the ones who really got the paper. And again, if they're very good, they may get specific thank you. Otherwise, they get the standard thank you. But their comments are posted online, just like everybody else, and the whole letter goes through.
And we do let them know that we have open peer review, and that will happen. So
that's right.
Thanks, Jose.
Thank you, Sarah. It was very interesting concept. We have tried that before. I am Mutaz Habal from Florida, and I'm the editor of a journal. We have tried them on the board. I have one question to ask you. Maybe it was brought before by you or some of the question. A lot of difference in when you put somebody on the board with their level of education. I mean, have you looked into that? And then have you looked at the outcome with the level of education? But you can have a PhD person, or you can have a banker, and you can have somebody who's working in the emergency room who's more familiar. They're all patients, but cross-sectionally, their education make a lot of difference in the way they give their opinion on what you are doing.
We don't ask them anything about their education. We take everyone with value, and if they have anything to say about their experience about the condition that they think is relevant, then we accept it. But we won't take it.
Well, thank you.